one of the smallest things, and it's all filled with TED Talks, YouTube series, tons of information. And so I think, kind of go back to your question, the thing that really frustrated me and really made me want to start to catalyze an entrepreneurial spirit was I disliked the system of the school system that I was in, but always had such a deep thirst for knowledge and care for learning.
What up, Bear Nation? We are back again for this week's episode of the Bare Necessities of Entrepreneurship podcast. Today, I have an amazing guest with us, Josh Cooper, the founder and CEO of Skoop Digital. Josh is a GenZ entrepreneur who has not only started one, but two different businesses. Finishing up his degree at Michigan State, he has created some amazing things and done some amazing things on his entrepreneurial journey. And his passion is to use his entrepreneurial fire and innovative technology solutions to make the world a better place. And one of his goals, which we'll talk about in this episode, is that let's go to Mars, figure out how to be multiplanetary in the world. So I'm excited to introduce our guest today, Josh Cooper. Josh, say hi to Bear Nation for me.
Thanks for having me. What's up, Bear Nation? It's great to be on.
Josh, so I'm excited to talk about your entrepreneurial journey, and there's a lot to cover today, from where you are to where you're going to your current business. So I want to start with the fact that you are still finishing up at Michigan State, right? I think if I'm not mistaken, you should be graduating this year. You've launched two companies and you're about to move across the country for the next stage of the journey. So why don't you tell us a little bit about where you are today in your just kind of personal journey and your current situation, and we'll get into the entrepreneurship piece of it.
It's been a long time coming. Many people, including myself, said it might not be able to get done, but we've aimed it out. I want to give Michigan State a lot of credit. When I first got to school, they didn't really have a robust entrepreneurial ecosystem. Today, they're ranked in the top 15 in the nation for entrepreneurial services, specifically for their student entrepreneurs. So I can confidently say the resources of Michigan State and their investment and interest in helping student entrepreneurs grow has been a major asset. I don't think we would have had the growth that we had over the last couple of years without the resources there. So huge shout out to them.
Love that. And so, you started Skoop in 2018, but prior to that, back in 2015, if I'm not mistaken, you founded a mental health awareness teen-led initiative. Tell me a little bit about that initiative and that early journey of your entrepreneurship.
Yeah, right on. You're going way back. You did your homework. So somewhere around late 2015, early 2016, there's kind of some tragic events that occurred in my high school. There were essentially 5 suicides that happened in about 14 months. One of which was a teacher, and so me and one of my best friends, Ryan, we were super kind of frustrated with the school's response, more specifically the lack thereof response. And so we kind of took matters into our own hands, and we wanted to create an awareness campaign. We called it You Matter, and it all started with the first ever You Matter week. And it was designed to be a week where we absolutely attacked and addressed mental health, specifically in the public domain, which was very kind of contrarian back in 2015. It was always a topic that was kind of sheltered and put to the back burner, and also one that didn't really happen publicly. And so the whole idea here, the methodology was, can we bring an abundant amount of resources, speakers, and kind of statistics to the public domain and talk about them openly? And that's really what we did. The first You Matter week, I believe, happened in the fall of 2016. and it was wildly successful. Dozens of individuals kind of came to our resources and said, hey, I didn't know I was alone with kind of these mental illnesses and various mental issues that many people were having. And we kind of worked hard to change the methodology around how we talk about it openly. And we've since scaled those to numerous schools in the area.
I mean, one, that's hard, especially in high school, and not just, many of us go by without experiencing that kind of tragedy of one. To have four, I can only imagine, and the pain that the school must have been reeling through. And I'm in awe of you every time I talk to you and learn a little bit more about your journey. I continue to just be impressed because, in a place where you could have been very hurting and, reserved, you decided to stand up instead and say, hey, we need to have a much more public conversation about this. And back in 2015, I mean, you're from the Detroit area, right? Michigan.
Yep.
Yeah, it was, I have a brother who had some mental health issues as a kid and at a young age, and we didn't know how to handle it, and we didn't talk about it much. And, being in the Midwest as well, seeing a therapist or talking about mental health wasn't very widely done. Even now, right? We'll just think of the 2020 Olympics, with Simone Biles stepping up, with Naomi Osaka talking about it publicly, that these athletes who have a lot going on, I think it's such a big piece. And, one of the things that I thought was kind of interesting when I moved to New York is everybody has a therapist out here, and everybody's like, oh yeah, I talked to my therapist about this. It's normalized and it's healthy in a way that I know. I love being from the Midwest. I still love, that, but like people I associate back home, like you don't talk about that. And, for us growing up, it was a very different, I think it's healthy that we have that outlet and we can express that. I think that's amazing that in high school, like the fuck that I was doing in high school, like to start something like this in high school is amazing. So I just want to say kudos. I know it was kind of a long walk for a short drink of water, but one, I'm sorry that you had to go through that. But two, I'm very impressed with how you were able to step up and speak out into a public domain and showing that entrepreneur spirit early. And so after high school, go ahead. Do you have something to say?
No, I was just going to say, I think it kind of in hindsight, I certainly didn't realize this at the time, but in hindsight, it really kind of shaped the entrepreneurial bones within me. There was so much mud that we had to muck through. There was so much that got in our way, and so many people who didn't want us to do these initiatives. And that really riled me up. And I really, at the time, it wasn't designed to be entrepreneurial at all. It was really genuinely out of pure frustration. And I think that's kind of shaped a lot of the way that I think about entrepreneurship in general is a lot of the things that I have done and plan to do are simply done out of pure frustration that they're not already happening. And it really, really grinds my gears, if you will, when I see kind of how I feel things should be and when they're not that way. And it kind of, like you mentioned in the beginning here, sparks an entrepreneurial fire in me. And I just have to put life on hold. I can't sleep. I can't think about anything else other than attacking that. And so it's a super, super fire furnace that burns is kind of the way that I would describe it.
Well, and I think that a lot of entrepreneurship is that it's you see a problem or have a frustration that others aren't taking into account. And you're like, wait, there is a solution for this. And we need to figure that out. And then, one of the things that you brought up, and I recorded an episode with Greg Larkin, who entrepreneur and intrapreneur, and he was saying, in order to be successful and know that you're going forward, you need to be looking, you're not like going out for a conflict, right? But you want opposition, not validation. When people are telling you, oh, it's great, they're not helping you.
Sure.
It's like when you have a sales call and they give you an objection and they push back on you, it's like, hey, they're interested because they're asking me a question to push back on it, versus like, hey, it sounds great, but not interested. Like, they'll blow you off really easily. But if they start asking questions back and there's opposition, it means you're actually validating that this is a conversation that needs to be had, or this is a problem that needs to be fixed, or a problem that people don't realize they have and don't think it's a problem that we need to educate them into fixing. So I like how you said that, of like, that shaped your journey, because after that you went to DECA, which is a program for preparing emerging leaders in entrepreneurship, right? So, here you are going into an emerging leaders program, and then you go to Michigan State and start a business. So did you know before high school you wanted to be an entrepreneur? Did you know you wanted to be an entrepreneur when you joined DECA? Or is it, after high school, that was a pivotal moment? Like, where did you decide, like, I want to be an entrepreneur and I want to create big change, and to create big change, that has to be me? Like, where did this mentality come from for you?
The terminology entrepreneur, like, never really came into the whole, that word wasn't really a vibrant part of my vocabulary probably until college. I always knew I wanted to spark change, specifically change for the better of the vast majority of people. That was always kind of instilled in me from a really young age. And I used to think public policy would be a good way to do that. And so there were a lot of years throughout middle school and early in the high school where I thought about pursuing a career in like public policy, being like an elected official, that kind of that whole route. And then very quickly into high school, somewhere around probably 2013, 2014, I started thinking to myself, there's a lot more that I could do in the private sector, and that's when my focus shifted. There's less legal red tape that you have to go through. There's less hoops that you have to jump through, and I think it could have more of a direct, more macro impact in the private sector. And so from that point on, I kind of looked away from public policy and have never looked back, and moved more towards the private sector. And then like the actual term entrepreneur probably came into my vocabulary when it actually came time to kind of monetize some of those projects that I was working on.
You grew up with a phone in your hand in this generation. So like, what was that inspiration? Was it your parents? Was it somebody? Was it, the access to information? What inspired you at 13, 14, 15 to want to create change and, spark change for the good? Like, what was that? Was there a catalyst, or was this just?
I think there are probably a lot of catalysts. One of which is I have a real frustration with the school system. One of the things that was really frustrating for me growing up is very early on, school and I didn't really get along. And I want to be really careful with how I say this, because I just want to kind of set the record straight for a second here. I am a proponent of going to college. I am a proponent of getting an education. And one of the things that was really frustrating for me was I did not like the system. I disliked kind of lazy teaching. I was the kind of kid who said, okay, if you're going to reuse material that you've been using for the past 10 years, then I'm going to go to the same websites that you use to print off your worksheets from and go to the answer key section, because you took a loophole route and I'm going to take a loophole route. And so very quickly into school, probably when I was like 10, 11, 12, I started getting really savvy. with kind of the curriculum component of school. And one of the things that really, really sparked a fire in me was my objection to the school system was always interpreted by both my parents and my teachers as, oh, we got another classic case of a kid who doesn't care to learn and a kid who doesn't care to, like develop his skill sets. And that was never the case. And I always knew that was never the case. I have only expanded my thirst for knowledge. It's gotten to the point where in the past like year or so, it hurts me to say this because I love music so much, but music has honestly gone from like the most common thing that I do in my pastime to like one of the smallest things, and it's all filled with TED Talks, YouTube series, tons of information. And so I think, kind of go back to your question, the thing that really frustrated me and really made me want to start to like catalyze an entrepreneurial spirit was I disliked the system of the school system that I was in, but always had such a deep thirst for knowledge and care for learning. And so I figured one of the best ways that I could kind of spark change and do the things that I wanted to do was to kind of be your own boss and take the entrepreneurial route.
I love that so much, and the fact that I went to school and I was a decent student,
Sure.
but I didn't study. I didn't need to. I could retain that information. I didn't actually feel I'm a procrastinator. I didn't feel like I needed to because I knew I could pass based off just my wits. Sure. And the professors that I really loved were the ones that that challenged me, that were hands-on learning, that were not, and this is not a shot at professors out there because they earn their tenure and stuff, but don't give me a professor that's always been a teacher. And like I looked at the teaching degree. I have a lot of friends who are teachers, and especially middle school, grade school teachers, like what they do is like, amazing. Like I could never do that. But when I got to especially high school and in college, looking at, I need somebody to teach me why this is important, not theory. Give me the why. Okay. Now that's a millennial mindset. But you saw that really early. And so I have that same feeling with you. And it's, many people don't know this, you and I, so for context, Josh and I met. Josh went through one of my boot camp programs with Half Day Group, which is how I got to know him. And I've just kind of been following along, and we've had a couple of conversations since then, prepare for the show and learning a lot about him. One of the things that I want to do is be a traveling adjunct professor of entrepreneurship and do like a 3 to 5 week course to kind of break the system a little bit. Like when I hear what they're teaching at some of these schools in entrepreneurship, it's so much theory and it's still using Uber and Starbucks and all these things, which is great. But like, Uber's story is no longer relevant. You're not going to have a great idea with a shitty deck and get funding and then think that someone's going to give you $5 million to your business. Like, it's a fucking grind. But there's like, I don't know if you read this book. Have you read this book before called Reality is Broken by Jane McGonigal?
No.
You should read it. It's about why video games make us better and how they can change the world. Like, I've always been a fan of video games. And the reason why is like my brain works so fast, and like it's about process and it's creating repeatable patterns. And it's a really interesting book about, I think, where the future of society can go through other alternative ways of learning and how our education system needs to adapt to that. Because I agree, going to college is not for everyone, but what I learned in college was structure. Like I learned how to be on my own. I learned how to overcome adversity. I learned that I didn't have a safety net to fall into, that I had to be accountable for my actions. So I think that there's a lot there. But anyways, Reality is Broken is a great book that I think you would love based on that mindset. So you're featuring this mindset. This mindset for you started early, and it really had to do more with just frustrations of life before I even knew what entrepreneurship was, right? And so then we get into Michigan State, and I want to, you said at the beginning of the show, Michigan State's done a great job creating an entrepreneurial space. You had shared with me previously that you were going to school and you had some frustrations with the curriculum. And at that time, you didn't like getting around campus. And so you started an interesting company that was the initial start to Skoop. And then you worked with Michigan State to do something really cool. So why don't you walk through that journey? Because this is another like amazing just like mindset shift of like you taking a little bit of your own education and the school system listening to you and creating a program around it. So why don't you share that story that you shared with me earlier?
Sure. So back in high school, I started doing a lot of digital advertising for local businesses, specifically local retail stores. So kind of the whole Shopify world, the e-commerce world came in high school. So I'm backtracking a little bit. So well, I actually started an e-commerce store like my junior year of high school where I was selling t-shirts.
For those listening, this guy is impressive. Like he is starting school, like he started businesses in junior high, high school, initiatives, programs. I mean, every time I talk to you, Josh, sorry for interrupting. I just get continually impressed with your entrepreneurial mindset. Just not even entrepreneurial, just your attitude of like, let's go create and build.
Oh, absolutely. I think you have to. You have to. And so for me in high school, going through kind of the whole e-commerce world, that was a super new concept. Today, it's like super mainstream. COVID really pushed a lot of these retail stores to move to the e-commerce world. But back in like 2014, 2015, this was still the infrastructure wasn't fully set up. I mean, today you can literally start a t-shirt company from your apartment, never touch the product, fulfillment centers across the country, handles distribution, use digital advertising to drive traffic to it, so on and so forth. The whole business infrastructure is built, it's set up. You can start that business overnight. That wasn't the case back about 6-7 years ago. And so I was responsible for specifically driving traffic to these local retail stores, online stores, on their websites. And so sometime around when I was like 16, 17, I was deploying a lot of budget to Facebook and Google ad campaigns. And I started to learn the algorithms and the systems really well. How do you digitally target people online based off their behaviors, their interests, and specifically drive them towards products that they desire? And so when I started to get to college, mobility was a big frustration point for me. Michigan State University is a beautiful campus, but it's a massive campus. It's really, really big. It's very wide, very, very long. You could have a 2, 3, 4 mile walk to class, depending on where you are on campus or where you need to go. And so this was the first time in my life. I grew up in suburbia. And so I was lucky enough to have a car in the tail end of high school. And so I always knew how to get myself to where I needed to go. And so this was my first city living situation. And it was very new to me to need to figure out transportation. And there were not a lot of viable options. I did get to school. I know we're talking about how young I am, but I got to school before, Ubers were absolutely everywhere. Don't get me wrong, they were coming, but Bird Scooter, Lime Scooter, none of that stuff existed yet. And so
that's all recent, like in the last 2 years on college campuses.
Absolutely.
I mean, super still new. And Uber was big for the last four years or so, but in smaller areas or smaller cities, you didn't have that many options.
That's exactly right. And so for me, I started to think to myself, well, I'm kind of like a broke college student here. I don't have a car and I need to get around campus. And yet somehow these multi-national, multi-billion-dollar corporations are able to offset the cost of access to their platforms. Google, Facebook, YouTube, the Weather Channel, Dictionary.com, the list goes on and on and on. Somehow they're able to provide a really amazing service to their end users. They don't charge access to the platforms to those end users, and yet they're some of the most profitable businesses in the world. And so my thought process here was, could we leverage the same digital ad field business model, but do it in the physical world and specifically apply the business model to mobility? And so in 2017, early 2018, Skoop Mobility came to fruition. We became the first micro-mobility, short-distance transportation company to offset the cost of access to our transportation because we monetize it on the back end using digital advertising. So we took a screen, similar to the one that's behind me right now. We took a 43-inch screen. We were the first to figure out how to weatherproof it, how to weatherize it, and how to secure it to a bike taxi. If you've ever heard of a pedicab rickshaw, for you guys over in Austin, Texas, near Santa Monica or New York City, Times Square, I know you know what I'm talking about. For everybody kind of within the central regions of the country, you probably have no idea what I'm talking about. It's this three-wheeled rickshaw bike taxi vehicle. Give it a Google. The second you see it, you'll be like, oh, I know exactly what that is. And so these are bikes. They're bike taxis with a cab attached to them. And so we hired a bunch of student drivers, pretty much just my friends. And I said to them, guys, I need people to hop on these bikes. They've got a flat screen TV slapped to the back of them. We figured out how to rig up power to it to power them out on the roads. We ended up just kind of hustling around town, going door to door to apartment complexes, pizza shops, bars, everything in between. And we sold them some ad space. And I think we did something like $55,000, $60,000 worth of ad sales in this first year with 2 bike taxis. And we took all that cash, we invested in like 7 more bikes. And so we built a bigger fleet. And then fast forward to about 12, 14 months in, here we are. We scaled to 2 cities. We're operating fleets in 2 cities. We're giving like 10,000 rides, doing more than 100,000 in ad sales. And the business is just scaling. This is when Bird and Lime Scooter come to the market. These guys are raising like $700 million at $3-4 billion valuations. I just cannot wrap my head around these numbers. And I'm like, it's on. We got to scale. And so we ended up getting our fleets up to 3 or 4 cities. We had fleets all the way from the campus that we started on all the way to the boardwalk of the Jersey Shore. And that's when things got really tricky. We didn't have a software system to remotely control our screens when they were on the roads. And we didn't have an on-the-ground sales team to sell our ad space for us. The whole business was dependent on our ability to get local sponsorships. So we could do a system that was, local sponsorships fueled it. And we used kind of built this methodology here. It was going to be a transportation service for the people, by the people, funded and promoted by local businesses. Long story short, when we realized we didn't have an adequate software to remotely control our screens, we didn't have an adequate software to sell our ad space online, that's when we completely pivoted the business and we said to ourselves, if we're going to be the next bird in line and we're going to paint the globe with our fleets, we need a better tech stack, something that's scalable and something that would be sustainable and will allow us to support fleets around the globe. We ultimately got out of the business of operating the bike taxi services ourselves. We got into the business of building the software that we wished we had, and that's where we've been ever since. And today, we have a software system called Skoop Signage. Our softwares can remotely control digital screens of all shapes and sizes, from small tablets to the screens on our bike taxis, all the way up to highway billboards and jumbotrons and stadiums. And then we have a kind of an e-commerce component that allows local and national advertisers to go into a specific venue's website, hit the Advertise Now tab, look at the digital inventory, the digital screens available, and deploy campaigns. So it's
pretty much programmatic in the fact that you don't actually have to be selling them ad space, like picking up the phone. They can go and buy what they want when they want, and it gives a cost at that time, right? Like up and down based on traffic and time of day, et cetera.
It's all the infrastructure that a venue would need to monetize their empty walls or their unmonetized digital screens. And then it's a really easy interface for passionate business owners who just simply want to share their important branding messages in the places where their consumers work, live, and play.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. And you're doing all this through college and understanding kind of this world of entrepreneurship and running a business. And so that also affected kind of school. And this is where Michigan State really stepped in and provided a lot of support. So I want to give you a chance to kind of share a little bit about how they supported you real quickly and what they did to kind of step up, and how, for those that are out there listening, and Josh talked about Michigan State's entrepreneurship program, like he was a big catalyst in helping pull some of this together, at least from my view in. So how do they step up to the call and like, hey, we're going to support your business?
Well, it certainly, they definitely didn't seek me out. I want to make that clear. While their systems are great and their services are phenomenal and some of the best in the world, it took a lot of development to get it all to come to fruition. And so when I started to raise outside capital to scale the businesses, there was a lot of investor pressure to drop out of school and focus full time on the business. And I get it. I get it. You work hard for your money as an investor. It's taken you an entire career to amass that capital, and suddenly you're going to entrust a 18, 19-year-old with your cash. You want to know that they're going to put it to good use, and you want to know they're going to put 120% of their time into deploying their capital efficiently. So I understand it. And school, to many of them, was a big barrier. And so many of them said, listen, if you're going to take my investment, I need you full time on this. And that was really tricky. That was really hard. There was a real inflection point there somewhere around going into sophomore year where I just couldn't bring myself to go into the classroom. I remember calling my dad and saying to him, I don't know if I can do this. I can't do both at the same time. I don't have enough bandwidth. It's eating me alive. Kind of small side note story. He said, okay, I need you to pick a coffee shop. I'm going to be up in East Lansing, and I'm going to come to campus tomorrow morning. We're going to talk this through. And he came to me with a notepad. We sat down the next day, and he lined item every single thing that my life depends on. My phone bill, my electricity utilities bill, my apartment rent, my car, every single thing. And he said, right now we share some of these. You're responsible for paying for some of them today. I've taken on some of these. You know that you're going to have to take on 100% of these expenses the second you end college. If you drop out and if you don't pursue a degree, you totally fine. I will love you. I'm your father. I will support you. All I need is for you to write me a check for all of these line items that I'm currently paying for. And so he really put it into perspective for me here. He said, it's important to me that you go to college and get a degree, and I'm going to support you all the way through. I'm incredibly blessed and lucky to have had a family that was able to put me through college and support me through, but they made it very clear. You're either going to get the degree or you're not going to get the degree, and you're going to sacrifice all financial support from us. And so together, me and him carved out a way to maybe figure out an avenue for me to go part-time. I worked with the university to figure out a road to the degree going part-time. And I also worked with my college, which was the communications school, to figure out a way to get internship credit for working on the business outside. And so together, my advisors helped me create a path that forced me to go to school year-round, taking summer classes 12 months of the year I was in school. I was only taking about 6 to 7 credits per semester, but we worked together and we figured it out. I think where Michigan State deserves a lot of credit is they've said to themselves, not every student can be a business student, but every student can be a student with a business if we provide them with an ecosystem that surrounds them with other like-minded entrepreneurs, and then we specifically bring resources to them that can help them expand their businesses. And so I think where Michigan State deserves the most credit is they just understand the mindset. Unlike many other schools across the world, they've said, okay, if you want to be an entrepreneur, that's great, go to our business school. They've specifically allocated capital and resources to building these systems in places online where students can go to grow their businesses, and they deserve a lot of credit for that.
And I love that. But what I love about that story even more is just your reasoning and rationale, and the fact that you went and go made that happen for yourself. It wasn't something that they did. You had to go make that happen. And we glorify Zuckerberg and these people that dropped out of college to start a business, and that's viable. You could be a millionaire, billionaire, etc. But also there's value in what you believe in and why you want to go finish a degree for those whatever reason that may be. And we're starting to live in a world where it has to be one or the other. And instead you sat down with your dad first, and then you sat down with the school and said, I want to do both. How do we make this happen? How do you support me and the things I do? Because everyone can have a business. Everyone can be a business student. Doesn't mean everyone should, right? It takes something special, not only to have a business, but to have a business that you scaled into multiple cities, to have a business that you scaled, doing 55K in revenue in a year. Those are things that are really impressive. And so the fact that you are able to work with an organization, work with people to create an ecosystem. That to me is what I find super impressive. And it also kind of goes into what Skoop is all about from a business model and the way that you're creating the software. And I know we're getting close to time, so I want to kind of switch gears after this. But one of the things I want to say that I find really impressive about Skoop and the story you told about how you grew this business to where it is today is in that vein. Over the last 2 years, Skoop won the 2019 South by Southwest. Was it top student startup in North America award? Or you were a top 10 finalist, if I'm not mistaken. There were 2019 TechCrunch Disrupt. I was trying to think Disrupt pick, and then they won the 2020 Ford City One Challenge, the 2020 CES Las Vegas. They were part of the Michigan Celebrate Small Business Awards, and you won the AWS, right? The AWS Amazon for Startups Challenge, and that's super impressive. And so those that are listening, you can hear about like these awards about what Josh and his team has done, but as you're hearing Josh's story, and what I really love about your journey is that while you have all this passion and energy and desire, it's the fact that you've always been able to create an ecosystem around you to support that, right? Skoop is nothing without your friends jumping on pedicabs, without the team you have currently, without your dad coming to college and helping, without Michigan State stepping in, without partnering up with your friend and looking at the school and where it needs to, without working with local businesses. And for those out there listening, entrepreneurship is two things. It's a business and a mindset, right? And if you want to be entrepreneurial minded, if you want to be an entrepreneur, if you want both those things in your life, you need to have the right ecosystem around you and understand that it's not a nice to have to build a community. It is necessary to have a community around you, an ecosystem around you of support to lean on when things get tough, whether that's people, time, energy, efforts, products, services, scale, etc. And so I love that. I think that's a big takeaway. And it's allowed you from junior high to today to create a large amount of your success because you're able to bring those things together. And to move on from this, right? So Skoop, you've got an amazing platform. You've raised some small funding, right? I think you've gotten some small funding early on. You're hoping to scale this thing to the moon, but pun intended there, you have bigger goals. So let's talk about your passion as a GenZ entrepreneur that's started initiatives and businesses. Where do you see Skoop going, and what are the things that you're passionate about moving forward that you want to see be manifested in your journey of life?
Sure. So I'll start with Skoop. We less than 10% of billboards in the country. There's about 25 million billboards, and I'm using that term loosely. I'm not just talking the highway billboards. I'm talking the signs that you see all throughout the places that you go. Less than 10% of those are digital. It's much more efficient, it's much more cost effective, and much more impactful to have those be digitized assets. And so we have a long way to go with our just adoption and transformation to digital. And then once we do have a huge network of digital screens around the world, we have a lot of plans to kind of reimagine and reinvent the way that humans interface with digital billboards and how they interact with the screens around them. So more to come on that. I think for me personally, where future businesses lie and what kind of technologies do I want to work on, there's kind of three key areas that I am paying very close attention to. I kind of sum them up to very generally speaking, artificial general intelligence and the way that it can be used specifically for biotechnology. I'm very fascinated by kind of the pre-predicting of diagnoses before symptoms even occur. I think is incredibly important. We could save billions of lives through doing that. I would definitely love to play a role in that technology. Climate is so important. We all have to play a role in that. It's about mitigation and it's also about adaptation. So I want to play a role in kind of helping the globe mitigate their energy consumption, making sure that we're using as many renewables streams of energy as humanly possible. But unfortunately, we're past the point where that's going to make enough of an impact. And so we have to go to the adaptation route, things like carbon capture, cloud seeding. There's a lot of technologies that I'm starting to study to figure out how we can avoid a climate disaster. And then the last one is I've been super passionate about this one probably since middle school, probably since I was about 11, 12 years old, is making life multiplanetary. I think Elon says it best. A future where humans are living on multiple planets is just simply more exciting than one where everything we know and everybody that we've ever known is limited to one planet. I could go on and on and on. We'd probably do a 50-hour podcast on all the reasons why it's so important to be multiplanetary, but kind of those three categories: artificial intelligence, climate, and making life multiplanetary. I think if I could look back when my dying days come, hopefully they're well in the future. But if I could look back and know that I played some type of role in the advancement of those three categories, I think that'd be a very fulfilled life.
I think that's wildly impressive. And for anyone that ever thinks that the world, if you don't understand and look at the youth of this world and just not be impressed with the amount of information that we have. Now, there's a dangerous thing with having too much information and sifting through what's real, but with the amount of information we have and the amount of tools in this digital age that we have the knowledge, the skills, especially at a younger age, to make real change. I think it's really important, and it's something that I feel really passionate about, and why I do a lot of work with millennial and Gen Z entrepreneurs and really love to work with these younger business owners is because change happens there. And you make a good point. Multiplanetary, I think, would be really interesting. Everyone's like, well, why do we want to go multiplanetary if we're not saving our planet? Well, there's kind of two sides to that. You can save our planet by releasing some of that burden as well. There's just so much things that I think need and could be a super intriguing thing. And I know we could go on for hours, and you may need to do like a part 2 podcast. I feel like we need to do like a Joe Rogan experience and talk space and space and entrepreneurship. And we'll definitely do that because it's something that I find really intriguing. Having worked with so many different entrepreneurs and startups in a number of different spaces. But I'm excited for you. And those that are listening, if you're not following Josh and don't know what he's building, you need to be following him and pay attention. And so you're actually about to make a big life move, right? And this episode will be airing in October. So when you're hearing it, it's going to be in October. We're recording this a little bit early, but you're about to, by the time that this episode plays, you'll have made a big life move to where?
To Los Angeles, California.
And why LA? What about LA is drawing you to take the next step of your journey, both personally and professionally?
You hit it earlier. Ecosystem is everything, and that's been one of the really challenging parts about COVID for I think all the many just people in general, but specifically the entrepreneurs of the world. I'm a kid from the Midwest. I'm from Detroit originally, just outside the city of Detroit. I've watched the city of Detroit go through a complete crumble all the way back to a rebirth and revitalization, and it's coming. I'd love to come back to Detroit and play a role in the growth in this ecosystem, but I think in order to do that very impactfully, I need to step outside of my bubble, and I need to surround myself by other young entrepreneurs. In the Midwest, it's been kind of challenging for me to find kind of those abundant ecosystems of young entrepreneurs who work like me, think like me, and so I think over the next couple of years, I intend on making the leap to a couple of ecosystems across the country, if not the world, to surround myself by others who are in a similar position, young entrepreneurs who want to change the world with innovative technologies. And so LA is just kind of step number one in stepping outside of this ecosystem. And I certainly have my eye on a couple of other bubbles that are seeing entrepreneurial growth before I make my way back here to the wonderful city of Detroit.
I hear New York's a pretty cool fucking place to be for advertising. Just saying, but I'd love to have you out in New York and meet you in person. But maybe one day in the future. I love that. I mean, I grew up in Midwest. Good. Well, I mean, I grew up in Midwest boy myself. Grew up in Kansas City, Missouri. Have a lot of pride for it. Ended up in Des Moines. Spent 5 years after college there, and I always felt that I had a fire to leave. I didn't know what that looked like, and it wasn't until I met the beautiful woman that now became my wife and told me, hey, 3 months into dating, I'm going to Europe to get a master's. I don't do long distance. Let's either end this before it gets tough or you come with. And I was like, fuck it, let's go.
Wow.
And moved to Milan, Italy, lived in Italy for 2 years. I'd never been to New York. I'd never been outside the US before I moved to Italy. I'd never been to New York. I moved here, been here for 5 years and love it. At some point, I think going back in the Midwest and making an impact somewhere, one of my impact, I really want to have a scholarship in my name at my high school, my college, to be able to help somebody like go pursue dreams. So I'm with you. I think that there's a lot to be said about going out and experiencing the world. It's a big place. Sure. It's smaller than you think, but it's a big place. And to have those different experiences really help come back and create innovative change. And I love that you're taking that personal and professional growth to go out to LA and take that next step of the journey and, scale not only the business, but your entrepreneurial passions to potentially help, make big change in the world. So Josh, we got just a couple minutes left. I want to ask, I always ask everyone on my show these last few questions. So we're going to go into it. What do you think your superpower is?
Oh man. I'll outwork you. And I really believe that. I'll outwork you because I'll either collapse and die before I beat you, or I will put everything on pause to make sure that I'm pushing forward. And it's not always about competition. Sometimes it's about just doing whatever it takes to get the innovations to come to the market that we need to make kind of what we're attempting to do possible, or make life-changing technologies come to fruition. And so I'm wired. It's a choice too. I think a lot of people use laziness or procrastination as a excuse. I'm lazy and a procrastinator at my core too. I really, really am. But sometimes you just have to kind of kick yourself in the face and say, get up, get to work. And so that's why one of my biggest fears is people who have got a chip on their shoulder. People who have something to prove are deadly. They're dangerous people because they'll outwork anybody. And I think my superpower is my work ethic.
Love that. I think work ethic and endurance, the outlast piece, is key. And I had a great episode with John Lynn. We talked about living with a chip on your shoulder, and that's something that I've always felt in my life as well. And I think it does. It's what drives me. What is one book, resource, show, piece of content that you would recommend right now for entrepreneurs?
I know you said one, but I'm going to give you two. So I think everybody should be reading Bill Gates' new book, How to Avoid a Climate Disaster. Just this is an issue that is unescapable. If you feel like you're kind of at the tail end of your life and you're maybe in the Q4 of your life and you won't be around to see some of these climate impacts hit you, you are wrong because you're seeing them today. So please get educated on what you can do to make your life more sustainable. Every little bit will help. The next one I'd recommend is a book I recently read called The High Frontier by a guy named Gerard K. O'Neill. And this guy is fascinating. He makes the case for why the best living arrangement for an exponentially growing species such as humanity is actually off the planet on these orbiting space stations. He talks about how we would build them, why we would build them, how they would be funded, how they would be sustainable, and man, is it mind blowing. So those would be the two.
I've never read The High Frontier. I'm gonna have to, but it makes me think of a lot of different movies, like
Sure.
Not only WALL-E,
a lot of movies are based on it.
but I think that's gonna be really interesting. So I'll definitely put that on my list. As you know, I'm a big consumer of books and content. Um, so the final question, as we hit time here, is what advice or lasting message that you'd give to Gen Zs, millennial entrepreneurs, anyone that's entrepreneur or wanting to be an entrepreneur out there. If you're looking at starting an entrepreneurial journey, what would that kind of piece of advice be to those listening in Bear Nation?
Take this with a grain of salt. Grain of salt, grain of sand. I never know which one it is. Salt. Perfect. The complexity of issues in the world is growing exponentially, and the adverse impacts of these issues are compounding. And what I mean by that is, I don't know that if you're a young person today and you're in middle school and you're going to be starting your career in the 2030s, maybe the late 2020s or 2040s or whatever, there are going to be massive issues that we need to solve. Um, Start your e-commerce t-shirt companies like I did really early on, so that you can just simply learn the ins and outs of running a company, the stuff that you shouldn't be spending time on years from now. Learn how to do cash flow, learn how to track money in, money out, learn the basics, so that when you are more mature and have kind of expanded your knowledge base, you can really, really, really focus on innovative technologies that will simply make the world a better place. I really mean this. We have a ton of issues that we're facing currently today, and those are only going to compound. And so, my advice to young entrepreneurs today would be find an area where we really need solutions. Don't just try and be another company that's just here to make profits. If somebody is doing a really good job of solving a problem, don't try and copy them. Go to another problem, because we need a lot of brains working on a lot of really hard problems. And if you can do that, it'll make the endurance factor a lot easier. There's going to be blood, sweat, and tears. You're not going to want to get up in the morning. But if you know that the thing that you're working on is bigger than you and bigger than humanity as a whole, it makes getting up every day a hell of a lot easier.
I love that. I think that's some really good advice. I will say that competition is a good thing because competition increases innovation. But I love where your train of thought with that is, because that's so important that we need. Look, profit, making money can be done anywhere, and that's why you become an entrepreneur. But you really become like real entrepreneurs that scale businesses do it because of passion. If you're solving a real problem and you're looking at problem solution first, the money will come. As an entrepreneur out there, don't start a business like, oh, I'm going to start this business because I'm going to make a lot of money. I've been there. I've done that. It burns you out. Start a business unless you're like, these multiple founders, entrepreneurs will start a business with the idea of selling it to make money. I get that. But because they see problems, they're doing it to still solve a problem. But when you build that first company, you're building this company, build it because you're solving a problem that you're frustrated with, something that the world needs. Because if you build something from money, I promise you, you will lose the passion and motivation very fucking quickly, and you will burn out. So I love that message, and it's why I went deep into your archives to really talk about your entrepreneurial journey, because this shit can happen at an early stage. It's not like you're born as an entrepreneur, like I always know I want to start a business. No, I wanted to spark fucking change, and in my journey of sparking change, I've grown into an entrepreneur, and I think we have this term of like, oh, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm not an entrepreneur. It doesn't matter. Live life to create impacts. Live life with passion. Live life by being a good human for the better of all humans. And through that, you can create some really cool shit. And that's like a big key takeaway I have from you, Josh, and your energy. And I want to thank you for being a part of Bear Nation. Before I let you go, where can Bear Nation find you? How can I get involved? How can I learn more about Josh Cooper and his journey and Skoop Digital and its journey?
Honestly, email me. My email is josh@skoop.digital. I'm findable on all the socials. Check out our website, skoop.digital, SKOOP.digital. But if these kinds of conversations are insightful and you want to have more of them, just reach out to me. I'm always open to talking to young entrepreneurs talking about new innovative technologies and how they can change the world.
Josh, I'll make sure to have your email, your socials, the website, all in the show notes. They can click it really easily and find you. Thank you so much for sharing your journey, man. It was amazing to hear, and I'm always impressed every time I speak with you. You have a fan in me for life, and being able to support all the initiatives that you have in any way that myself or Bear Nation can help, please let me know. Thank you for being a part of it today.
Oh, man. Thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Bear Nation, until next episode, stay well. Bear Nation, thanks for listening to the Bare Necessities of Entrepreneurship. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave us a review.